I fumbled with my keys at the front door, grinning like an idiot. The surprise was going to be perfect. Nina had no idea I was flying in 3 days early for Thanksgiving. Mom would probably cry happy tears when she saw me standing in the kitchen. I'd left Seattle at dawn, driven straight through, surviving on gas station coffee and the thought of home-cooked meals. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The lock wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling the key that had worked perfectly when I visited in August. Nothing. Confused, I knocked, then rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see movement inside. Footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there stood Brian, my stepfather, wearing stained sweatpants and a wife-beater tank top. His eyes were bloodshot, and the familiar smell of whiskey mixed with something chemical hit me immediately. Elena. His voice was flat, emotionless. What are you doing here? Surprise visit for the holiday. I tried to keep my tone light, even though something felt wrong. My key doesn't work. Yeah, I changed the locks. He didn't move from blocking the doorway. My stomach tightened. Why would you change the locks without telling me? My house, my decision. He crossed his arms, and I noticed his knuckles were bruised. Where's Mom? Where's Nina? Your mother's at work. Nina's at class. Come back tomorrow when your mom's here to deal with you. Deal with me? I stepped forward. This is my family's home. Dad bought this house. My name is on the mortgage paperwork. That's where you're wrong. Brian's face darkened. Your dad's dead. Been dead for 6 years. This is my house now, and you don't get to just show up unannounced. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Mom. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist hard enough to make me gasp. You're not calling anyone. He yanked me forward, off balance, and suddenly I was inside the house with the door slamming behind me. The living room looked wrong. Dad's bookshelf was gone. The family photos that lined the mantel had disappeared. In their place were Brian's NASCAR collectibles and empty beer bottles. The carpet was stained and reeked of cigarette smoke, even though Mom was allergic. What happened to all our things? I tried to keep my voice steady, pulling my wrist free. Sold most of it. Needed the cash. Brian moved toward the kitchen, and I followed, my heart pounding. That's when I saw them. Boxes stacked by the back door, labeled with my name and Nina's name in Mom's handwriting. Our belongings, packed up like we were being erased from the house. What is this? Spring cleaning. Brian opened the fridge, pulled out another beer. You and your sister take up too much space. Time to move on with your lives. Does Mom know you're doing this? His laugh was cruel. Your mom does what I tell her. Finally figured out where her loyalty should be. I moved toward the boxes, needing to see what he was throwing away. That's when I spotted it, Dad's watch, the one he wore every single day, sitting on top of a box marked Donate. The watch Mom promised would be mine. You can't give this away. I reached for it. Brian's hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me around. His breath was toxic, a mixture of alcohol and something sharper, chemical. Pills, I realized. He was mixing pills with alcohol again. Don't touch what's not yours. My father's watch is mine. Mom promised. The slap came out of nowhere, snapping my head to the side. The shock of it froze me for a second before the pain registered, sharp and hot across my cheek. I staggered back, hand flying to my face. You just hit me. Brian advanced, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, not directed at me anyway. Pure rage, completely unhinged. You want to come into my house making demands? You want to tell me what I can and can't do with my property? I backed toward the front door, but he was faster, blocking my path. My phone was in my jacket pocket. If I could just get to it. Where's Nina's tuition money? The words came out before I could stop them. Mom said you were handling the spring semester payment. His expression shifted, just for a second. Guilty. Spent. On what? None of your business. You gambled away my sister's college fund. The realization hit me like ice water. That's why you're packing up our stuff. That's why you changed the locks. You're trying to cover up what you did. Brian's face turned purple. You don't know anything. I know Mom has been transferring money to you every month. I know she refinanced the house last year. I know you haven't worked in 2 years. I pulled out my phone. And I'm calling the police. He lunged. I tried to dodge, but my back hit the wall. His fist connected with my ribs, driving the air from my lungs. I crumpled, gasping, phone clattering across the hardwood floor. Through the pain and shock, I heard it. The distinct click of the front door lock engaging. Mom's voice, tired and defeated, somewhere above me. Brian, what's going on? I heard shouting. Your daughter broke in. Brian's voice switched instantly, becoming the concerned husband. I came home and found her trying to steal things. When I confronted her, she attacked me. I looked up, trying to focus through the pain. Mom stood in the entryway, still in her nurse's scrubs, face pale. Behind her, through the open door, I could see our neighbor, Mr. Reynolds, standing on his porch, phone pressed to his ear. That's a lie. I forced the words out. He hit me. He changed the locks. He's been stealing from you. Patricia, don't listen to her. Brian moved toward Mom, his back to me now. She's always been dramatic. You know how she gets. But Mom's eyes were locked on my face, on the mark I could feel swelling. Her professional instincts kicked in, the nurse in her assessing injuries. Elena, don't move. Her voice was shaking. Brian, step away from her right now. She's lying, Patricia. She's trying to turn you against me. The sound of sirens cut through the tension. Mr. Reynolds had called 911. Through the still open door, I watched a patrol car pull into the driveway, lights flashing red and blue across our small front yard. The police officer who entered was a woman, late 30s, with sharp eyes that took in the scene immediately. My position on the floor, Brian standing over me, Mom frozen in the doorway. Her nameplate read Torres. Riverside Police. We received a call about a domestic disturbance. Her hand rested casually on her belt, near her radio. Everyone stay where you are. Officer, thank God you're here. Brian's voice dripped with false relief. My stepdaughter broke into our home. When I tried to stop her from stealing, she became violent. I was defending myself and my property. Officer Torres looked at me, still on the floor, holding my ribs. Ma'am, are you injured? He hit me. Twice. Once in the face, once in the ribs. I tried to stand, gasping at the sharp pain. I didn't break in. This is my family's home. My father bought it. My name is on the original mortgage documents. That's ridiculous. Brian scoffed. She moved out years ago. She has no claim here. Then why did you change the locks this week? Why are you packing up my sister's belongings? Why did you steal her college tuition money? Patricia. Brian turned to Mom, his voice taking on that manipulative edge I'd heard him use before. Tell her. Tell the officer that this is our house. That Elena has no right to be here. Mom stood very still, and I watched her face cycle through emotions. Fear. Confusion. Then something else, something harder. She looked at Brian, really looked at him, and I saw the exact moment she made her choice. Her eyes moved to the boxes by the door, to Dad's watch sitting on top, to the bruise forming on my face. Officer Torres. Mom's voice was quiet but steady. I'm a registered nurse. I need to examine my daughter for injuries. Brian Hutchins is my husband, but this house was purchased by my first husband, Michael Martinez, in 2012. Elena was listed as a co-signer on the mortgage when she turned 18. She has every legal right to be here. The room went silent. Brian's face transformed from confident to stunned to furious in the span of 3 seconds. Patricia, what are you doing? What I should have done 2 years ago. Mom moved past Brian, kneeling beside me. Her hands were gentle but professional as she checked my face, my ribs. Possible fractured rib. Definite contusion to the cheekbone. She looked up at Officer Torres. I want to press charges for domestic assault. And I need to report financial abuse and theft. Brian exploded. You ungrateful witch. After everything I've done for you. Sir, step back. Officer Torres moved between Brian and us, her hand now definitely on her weapon. Another patrol car is en route. You need to calm down right now. This is my house. Brian was screaming now, all pretense gone. I fixed this dump. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I took care of these women. And this is how they repay me. Mr. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, slightly breathless. Officer, I have video. My security camera faces this house. I've been recording for the last 20 minutes. Started when I heard the shouting. Officer Torres nodded. Mr. Reynolds, please stay available. Sir, she addressed Brian firmly, I'm going to need you to sit down on that couch and keep your hands where I can see them. The second patrol car arrived, and suddenly our small living room was full of uniforms. An ambulance was called. Mom held my hand while a paramedic examined me, her face a mask of controlled emotion. But her grip was tight, almost desperate, and I could feel her trembling. How long? I whispered. How long has he been like this? She closed her eyes. It got bad about a year ago. Started with little things. Controlling the money. Making decisions without asking me. Then the gambling. The pills. I thought I could manage it. Thought if I just kept the peace, kept everything smooth, it would get better. Where's Nina? Safe. At school. Mom's voice cracked. I made sure she stayed on campus as much as possible this semester. She doesn't know how bad it's gotten. Officer Torres approached with a clipboard. Ms. Martinez, I need to take your statement. And I need to inform you that we're arresting Mr. Hutchins for assault and battery. Based on what you've told us about the financial situation, our detective unit will want to speak with you about possible fraud and theft charges. Brian was being handcuffed, still shouting threats and accusations. As they led him past us, he stopped, looked at Mom with pure venom. You'll regret this, Patricia. Without me, you're nothing. You'll lose everything. Mom stood up, and for the first time in the 6 years since she'd married him, I heard steel in her voice. I already lost everything that mattered when I let you into our lives. The only thing I'm losing now is you. They took him away, and the house fell silent except for the crackle of police radios and the murmur of officers taking statements. I sat on the couch, ice pack pressed to my face, watching my mother methodically answer questions. She pulled out bank statements she'd apparently been hiding. Showed them the refinancing documents. Explained about Nina's tuition fund, about Dad's belongings that had been sold, about the locks changed just 3 days ago. Mr. Reynolds provided his security footage. On the officer's tablet, I watched myself arrive, watched the confrontation, watched Brian hit me. Clear as day. Irrefutable. As the sun set and the last police car pulled away, Mom and I sat in the wreckage of our living room. The boxes Brian had packed seemed to mock us, evidence of how close we'd come to losing everything. I need to call Marcus Chen. I finally said. Dad's friend. The attorney. Mom nodded slowly. I should have called him months ago. Years ago, maybe. She looked at me, tears finally spilling over. I'm so sorry, Elena. I let him hurt you. I let him destroy your father's memory. I was just so tired of being alone. You're not alone. I took her hand. You have me. You have Nina. And tomorrow, we start fixing this. I spent that night in the emergency room. Mom insisted, using her nurse voice that left no room for argument. The X-rays showed a hairline fracture in my left rib, nothing that required surgery but enough to make breathing painful for the next few weeks. The doctor, an older woman with kind eyes, documented everything with meticulous care. She'd seen enough domestic violence cases to know what we needed. Photographs of the bruising, written descriptions of the injuries, timestamps on everything. She handed me a thick folder of paperwork as I was discharged. Keep these safe. Her voice was gentle but firm. You'll need them for court. And please, follow up with your primary care physician in a week. Mom drove us home in silence. It was past midnight, and Riverside streets were empty. The house looked different when we pulled into the driveway, darker somehow, like the violence had stained it. Yellow crime scene tape still marked the front door where officers had taken photographs. I can't go in there. Mom's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Not tonight. Not after everything. We drove to Nina's apartment near the community college instead. My sister answered on the third knock, bleary-eyed in pajama pants and an oversized hoodie. Her face transformed from annoyance to shock when she saw us. What happened? She pulled me inside, eyes widening at the bandage on my face. Elena, your face. Mom, why didn't you call me? We sat at Nina's tiny kitchen table while Mom explained everything. I watched my sister's expression shift from disbelief to anger to something harder. When Mom got to the part about the tuition money, Nina's hands curled into fists. He stole my entire spring semester. Her voice was dangerously quiet. $23,000? Plus what he took from the refinancing. Mom's voice was hollow. And your father's life insurance payout that I'd been saving for your graduate school. It's gone, Nina. All of it. My sister stood abruptly, pacing the small apartment. How long have you known? I suspected for months. Mom's shoulders sagged. But I kept hoping I was wrong. Kept thinking if I just worked more shifts, picked up overtime, I could cover the gaps without you girls knowing. I thought I was protecting you. By letting him steal from us? Nina's voice cracked. By letting him hit Elena? I didn't know he would. Mom looked up, tears streaming freely now. I knew he had a temper. Knew about the gambling. But he never raised a hand to me, never threatened the girls. I thought if I could just keep things calm, manage his moods, we'd be okay. I reached across the table, taking Mom's hand. He's a professional manipulator. He knew exactly how to keep you compliant. Financial control, emotional manipulation, isolating you from support systems. It's textbook abuse. Nina sank back into her chair. What do we do now? Now we fight back. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to find Marcus Chen's contact information. Dad's friend, the attorney. He'd given me his card at the funeral 6 years ago, told me to call if we ever needed anything. I never imagined I'd actually use it. Tomorrow morning, we meet with him. We figure out the legal options. And we make sure Brian never touches this family again. What about the house? Nina asked. Can we even afford to keep it without my tuition money? The house is complicated. I pulled up the documents I'd photographed on my phone months ago, during my last visit when something had felt off. Dad bought it outright in 2012 using his VA benefits and savings. When I turned 18, he added me as a co-owner on the deed, said it was for estate planning purposes. When he died, the house transferred to Mom and me jointly. Brian's name was never on the original deed. Then how did he refinance? Nina leaned forward, studying my phone screen. Mom refinanced in her name only last year. I found the documents tonight while the police were there. She pulled out her own phone, showing U.S. bank statements she'd been secretly collecting. He convinced me we needed the money for home repairs. The roof, the furnace, foundation work. I signed the papers because I trusted him. $50,000, borrowed against the house. Did any repairs actually happen? I already knew the answer. Mom shook her head. He said the contractors fell through. Then he said the money was invested in a business opportunity. I just kept believing him because the alternative was admitting I'd been a fool. You weren't a fool. Nina's voice softened. You were grieving Dad and trying to build a new life. Brian saw an opening and exploited it. We spent the rest of the night on Nina's couch, the three of us squeezed together like we used to do during thunderstorms when we were kids. Nobody really slept. Every creak of the building made us jump. Every car passing on the street sent Mom's hand reaching for her phone, checking if Brian had somehow made bail. He won't, I kept reassuring her. Assault charges, especially with documented injuries and video evidence. The judge won't let him out tonight. But eventually he will get out. Mom's voice was small in the darkness. And then what? He knows where I work. He knows Nina's schedule. He knows everything about us. Then we get a restraining order. I shifted carefully, my ribs protesting. And we document everything. Every text, every call, every time he drives past the house or shows up at your work. We build a case so airtight that he spends years behind bars, not months. Morning came too early. I woke to sunlight streaming through Nina's thin curtains and the smell of burned coffee. My sister stood at the stove, attempting to make breakfast with her limited supplies. Best I can do is scrambled eggs and toast. She set plates on the table. The milk expired last week, so coffee's black. Mom emerged from the bathroom looking exhausted but determined. She'd changed into fresh scrubs, her work uniform, but today wasn't about going to work. Today was about taking back our lives. Marcus Chen's office was in downtown Riverside, above a coffee shop called The Daily Grind. We climbed the narrow stairs at 9 in the morning, and I knocked on the frosted glass door marked Chen and Associates, Family Law. The man who answered was older than I remembered from the funeral, his hair now fully gray, but his eyes were the same, sharp and assessing. Elena Martinez. He shook my hand carefully, noting the bandage. Your father would be raising hell right now if he could see what happened to you. His office was cluttered but organized, law books lining every wall, case files stacked with meticulous precision. He gestured us to chairs and listened without interrupting as we explained everything. Mom provided the financial documents. I showed him the medical reports and photographs. Nina pulled up Brian's social media, posts showing him at casinos, at bars, spending money we now knew was stolen. Marcus took notes on a yellow legal pad, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When we finished, he sat back, removing his reading glasses. All right. Let's talk about what we're dealing with legally. First, the criminal charges. Assault and battery with documented injuries and video evidence. That's solid. The district attorney will prosecute that, and Brian's looking at real prison time, probably 2 to 5 years if he takes a plea, possibly more if it goes to trial. And the money? Mom's voice was barely audible. Can we get any of it back? That's where it gets complicated. Marcus pulled up a database on his computer. The refinancing was legal because Patricia, you're a named owner of the property. Even though Brian manipulated you into signing, proving duress or coercion after the fact is difficult. However, if we can show he used fraudulent reasons for the loan, if those home repairs never happened and the money went to gambling or personal expenses, we might have a case for financial fraud. He clicked through several screens. The tuition money that was in a joint account with Brian's name on it, that's harder to recover. Once it's spent, especially on gambling, the money's usually gone. We can pursue a judgment against him, but collecting from someone with no assets and a prison sentence is nearly impossible. So we just lose everything? Nina's voice rose. He steals from us and faces no consequences? He'll face criminal consequences. Marcus turned to her. And we can make his life very difficult financially for decades. Judgments don't expire. If he ever gets a job, owns property, receives an inheritance, we can garnish it. But I won't lie to you, recovering the actual cash is unlikely. What about the house? I asked. Can we protect it from him? Absolutely. Marcus pulled out a fresh legal pad. Patricia, Elena, since you're both on the deed, we'll file a partition action to formalize the ownership structure. We'll also get a restraining order that prohibits Brian from coming within 500 feet of the property. If he violates that, he goes back to jail. He can't claim any ownership? Mom asked. Even though we were married? Oregon is a community property state with exceptions. Since the house was purchased before the marriage and his name was never on the original deed, he has no ownership claim. The refinancing doesn't change that. The debt is secured by the house, yes, but the actual ownership remains with you too. Mom sagged with relief. So we can keep it. If you can afford the mortgage payments. Marcus looked at the refinancing documents again. Patricia, what are the monthly payments now? $1,800 a month. Mom's voice was grim. That's double what it was before the refinancing. On my nurse salary alone, I can barely make it. And that's not counting utilities, insurance, property taxes. I can help. I spoke up immediately. I make good money in Seattle. I can contribute. For how long? Marcus asked gently. Elena, you have your own life, your own career. This isn't your burden to carry indefinitely. She's my mother. Nina's my sister. That house is my father's legacy. I met his eyes steadily. I'll carry it as long as I need to. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Then here's what we do. We file for the restraining order today, emergency basis. We get you access back to the house with a police escort to document everything and retrieve essential items. We file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office about the financial fraud. And we start building the civil case for damages and restitution. He stood, gathering papers. Patricia, I'm going to need you to close any joint accounts immediately. Open new accounts at a different bank, one Brian doesn't know about. Change all your passwords, your PIN numbers, everything. Assume he has access to everything you've ever shared with him. Mom nodded, pulling out her phone. I'll call the bank right now. Nina, you need to do the same. Marcus turned to my sister. Check your credit report. Make sure he hasn't opened accounts in your name. It happens more often than you'd think. While Mom stepped into the hallway to call the bank, Marcus turned to me. How's your employer handling the extended absence? I haven't told them yet. I admitted. I took personal days for the Thanksgiving visit, but I'm supposed to be back Monday. You need to have that conversation today. He handed me his card. Use me as a reference if needed. Explain you're dealing with a family emergency and legal proceedings. Most employers are understanding about domestic violence situations. The word hit me like a slap. Domestic violence. I'd been thinking of it as assault, as Brian being violent, but hearing it labeled so clinically made it real in a new way. Marcus must have seen something in my face because his expression softened. Elena, I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably want to just go back to Seattle, back to your normal life where this isn't your problem. But your mother and sister need you right now. And frankly, you need to see this through. For your own healing, if nothing else. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Your father was one of the best men I ever knew. Marcus's voice grew rough. What Brian did, stealing from his family, destroying his memory, that's unforgivable. But Michael raised you to be strong. To stand up for what's right. That's exactly what you're doing. By noon, we had emergency restraining orders in place. By 2, we had a police escort back to the house on Willow Creek Drive. By evening, we documented every room, every missing item, every piece of evidence of Brian's systematic destruction of our family home. Walking back into the house felt like entering a crime scene, which I supposed it was. Officer Torres accompanied us, along with a younger officer named Garrett who carried a camera to document everything we found. The air inside was stale, carrying the ghost of Brian's cigarette smoke and something sour I couldn't identify. Mom stood in the entryway, frozen. Nina squeezed past her, heading straight for her old bedroom. I heard her gasp, then a string of curses that would have gotten her grounded a few years ago. He emptied everything. Nina's voice carried down the hallway. My books, my art supplies, even my winter clothes. It's all gone. I moved through the living room with Officer Garrett, who photographed each empty space where furniture used to stand. Dad's leather armchair that he'd saved for months to buy, gone. The antique coffee table that had belonged to his grandmother, missing. Even the curtains Mom had sewn by hand were torn down, leaving bare windows that made the room feel exposed. Ms. Martinez, when was the last time you were home? Officer Torres asked Mom gently. 4 days ago. Mom's voice was distant, shocked. It didn't look like this. The furniture was here. The photos were on the walls. How did he move everything so fast? Storage unit, probably. Torres made notes on her tablet. Or he sold it. We'll check local pawn shops and online marketplaces. Sometimes we get lucky and can track items down before they're gone for good. I moved into what used to be my childhood bedroom. Brian had converted it into his so-called office, but now even that was mostly cleared out. The cheap desk remained, scarred with cigarette burns. I pulled open drawers systematically, finding nothing but junk until the bottom drawer stuck. I yanked harder, and it finally gave way. Inside was a lockbox, the cheap kind you can buy at any hardware store. The lock was flimsy. I grabbed a letter opener from the desk and popped it open in under 30 seconds. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Officer Torres. My voice came out steady despite the rage building in my chest. You need to see this. The box contained a treasure trove of evidence. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts. Receipts from casinos in 3 different states. Credit card statements in Mom's name that she'd never seen. And at the bottom, a burner phone. Torres pulled on latex gloves before handling anything. This is good work, Ms. Martinez. Real good work. She powered on the phone. Let's see what we have here. The phone revealed text conversations with someone named Deacon about gambling debts and payment schedules. Photos of our house, our cars, itemized lists of what could be sold and for how much. Most damning were the messages to someone saved as J, discussing the refinancing plan and how to convince Mom to sign. He had this plan for months. I read over Torres's shoulder. Maybe longer. This wasn't impulsive. It was systematic theft. We're seizing this as evidence. Torres bagged everything carefully. Your attorney is going to want copies of all this. The district attorney definitely will. This moves Brian's charges from simple assault into organized fraud territory. Mom appeared in the doorway, holding something small in her hands. Dad's wedding ring. I found it in the bathroom, in the back of the medicine cabinet. He was going to sell it. She started crying, the kind of deep, shaking sobs that come from somewhere beyond grief. He was going to sell Michael's wedding ring. Nina wrapped her arms around Mom, and they stood there in the doorway of what used to be my room, holding each other while I documented evidence of how thoroughly Brian had planned to destroy us. We spent 3 hours going through every room. The master bedroom was the worst. All of Dad's remaining clothes, the ones Mom had kept in the back of the closet, were gone. His military uniform, his dress blues that he'd been so proud of, missing. Even the photo album from their wedding had vanished from Mom's nightstand. But we found other things too. In the garage, hidden behind old paint cans, were 3 boxes labeled charity that Brian apparently hadn't gotten around to disposing of yet. Inside were some of Dad's tools, a few photo albums, and Nina's art portfolio from high school. Small victories, but they felt enormous. The kitchen revealed more financial documents hidden in a false bottom of the pantry. Brian had been skimming money from Mom's paycheck for over a year, having convinced her to set up direct deposit to an account he controlled. He'd been giving her an allowance from her own salary, keeping the rest for gambling. 18 months. Mom stared at the bank statements. For 18 months, he's been stealing my paycheck, and I just believed him when he said money was tight. I never even checked the accounts. He isolated you from the finances. I pointed to earlier statements showing how he'd gradually taken over. First joint accounts for convenience, then changing passwords, then convincing you that he should handle all the bills to reduce your stress. Classic financial abuse pattern. Your mother's a smart woman. Officer Torres packed up the last of the evidence. But abusers are smarter. They know exactly how to exploit trust and exhaustion. This isn't her fault. By the time we finished, it was dark outside. We'd filled 12 evidence bags, taken over 200 photographs, and compiled a list of missing items 3 pages long. The house felt hollow, stripped of everything that had made it a home. We can't stay here. Nina voiced what we were all thinking. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. It doesn't feel safe. Mom nodded slowly, looking around the empty living room. Even with the restraining order, even knowing he's in jail, I keep thinking I hear him. Keep expecting him to walk through that door. We locked up the house and drove back to Nina's apartment in silence. My phone had been buzzing all day, messages from my boss in Seattle asking about my return, from coworkers wondering if I was okay. I'd been ignoring them, but I couldn't anymore. I stepped onto Nina's tiny balcony and called my supervisor, Amanda. She answered on the second ring. Elena, we've been worried. Are you coming back Monday? I need to extend my leave. The words came out harder than I expected. There's a family emergency. My stepfather assaulted me, and we're dealing with legal proceedings. Silence on the other end. Then Amanda's voice, much softer. Oh my God. Elena, are you okay? Are you safe? I'm safe now. But my mother and sister need me here. I don't know for how long. I explained the situation in broad strokes, leaving out the most painful details. Take the time you need. Amanda was firm. We have family emergency leave for exactly this reason. I'll talk to HR, get the paperwork started. And Elena, if you need anything, references for attorneys, resources, anything, you let me know. Thank you. Relief washed over me. I was worried about my job. Your job will be here when you're ready. Family comes first. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you're going through this. And I'm glad you're fighting back. After the call, I sat on the balcony watching traffic pass on the street below. Riverside had never felt like home after I left for Seattle. I'd built a whole life away from here, a life where I controlled my own space and time and decisions. Coming back was supposed to be a quick visit, a holiday surprise. Instead, it had become a battle for everything my father built. Nina joined me, handing me a mug of tea. Mom's asleep. Finally. She cried for an hour straight. I should have visited more. The guilt was sudden and sharp. If I'd been here, if I'd been paying attention, maybe I would have noticed what Brian was doing. Stop. Nina's voice was fierce. This is not on you. You were living your life, building your career, exactly like you were supposed to. Brian's a predator. He would have found a way no matter what. Mom kept saying she was protecting us by not telling us how bad things were. She was wrong. Nina sat beside me. You don't protect people by hiding abuse. You protect them by asking for help. But she was scared and ashamed and probably thought she could handle it herself. That's what abusers count on, that shame that keeps victims silent. We sat quietly for a while, the city sounds filling the silence. Finally, Nina spoke again. What happens now? After the court stuff, after Brian goes to prison, what do we do? We rebuild. I sipped my tea, thinking through the logistics. Mom needs to downsize. That house is too big, too expensive with the refinancing debt. We sell it, pay off what we can, and find her something manageable. She'll never agree. Nina shook her head. That house is everything Dad left us. Dad left us each other. The house is just wood and nails. It's already ruined anyway. Brian made sure of that. Better to let it go and start fresh than try to live in a place that'll always remind us of what he took. What about my school? Nina's voice went small. Without the tuition money, I can't finish my degree. Yes, you can. I'd already been running numbers in my head. I'll cover it. I've got savings, and I can pick up contract work on the side. You're finishing school, Nina. That's non-negotiable. Elena, that's too much. I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything. I'm making a choice, the same choice Dad would make. Family takes care of family. Inside, I could hear Mom moving around, probably unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chin. Court date set for preliminary hearing, Wednesday 9 a.m. Brian's attorney already reaching out about plea deals. Call me tomorrow. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. You think you won? This isn't over. You'll regret destroying my life. I screenshotted immediately and forwarded it to both Marcus and Officer Torres. Then I blocked the number. Brian was already violating the restraining order from jail. Perfect. More evidence for the prosecutor. Nina saw my expression. What is it? Brian being stupid. I showed her the text. He can't help himself. The narcissism won't let him stay quiet even when staying quiet would help his case. Good. Let him keep digging his own grave. We went back inside, and I settled onto Nina's couch for another sleepless night. My ribs ached where Brian had hit me, a constant reminder of how quickly violence could erupt. I kept replaying the moment, analyzing what I could have done differently, how I could have protected myself better. But the truth was simpler and harder. I couldn't have prevented it. Brian had been a bomb waiting to explode, and my arrival had simply lit the fuse. If it hadn't been me, it would have been Mom or Nina eventually. At least this way, we had evidence. We had documentation. We had a fighting chance. Tomorrow we'd meet with Marcus again to prepare for the hearing. Tomorrow we'd start the process of untangling the financial mess Brian had created. Tomorrow we'd take another step toward reclaiming our lives. But tonight, I lay in the dark listening to Mom's quiet crying from Nina's bedroom and my sister's restless tossing on the air mattress beside me, and I let myself feel the full weight of what we'd lost. Not just money or possessions or even the house. We'd lost the illusion of safety. The belief that family meant protection. The trust that letting someone into your life wouldn't result in systematic destruction. Brian had stolen more than tuition money and furniture. He'd stolen our peace. And that, more than anything else, was what I was determined to take back. Wednesday morning arrived with gray skies that matched my mood. Marcus had scheduled the preliminary hearing for 9, which meant we needed to be at the courthouse by 8:30. Mom had barely slept, I could tell by the dark circles under her eyes and the way her hands shook as she tried to apply makeup to cover the exhaustion. Nina drove us in her beat-up Honda, the heater barely working against the November chill. We parked in the public lot and walked toward the Clackamas County Courthouse, a squat building that tried to look imposing but mostly just looked tired. Marcus met us at the entrance, briefcase in hand and wearing a suit that had seen better days but was immaculately pressed. Before we go in, a few things. He guided us to a quiet corner of the lobby. Brian will be there, in custody but present. Don't react to anything he says or does. Don't make eye contact. The judge will be watching everyone's behavior, and we want to appear calm and credible. What if he tries to talk to me? Mom's voice wavered. He won't be allowed to approach you. There will be deputies in the courtroom. But if he shouts something, if he tries to get a reaction, you ignore him completely. Understood? We nodded. Marcus checked his watch. The prosecution has a strong case. The video evidence alone is damning. But Brian's attorney, a guy named Westbrook, is known for aggressive tactics. He'll try to paint Elena as the aggressor, claim Brian was defending his home from an intruder. But I had a key. I protested. I'm on the deed. I know. And we'll establish that. But be prepared for him to twist the narrative. That's his job. He pulled out a folder. I've got copies of everything for the judge. The deed showing your ownership, the original mortgage documents, the medical reports, Mr. Reynolds' security footage. We're solid. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches that looked like church pews and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. We took seats behind the prosecutor's table. Across the aisle, I could see Brian's attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, reviewing papers with intense focus. Then they brought Brian in. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame, like he'd lost weight in just a few days. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and a deputy stood close by. When his eyes found us, something ugly crossed his face. Not remorse. Not shame. Pure hatred. Mom flinched beside me. I took her hand, squeezing hard. Nina sat on her other side, forming a barrier between Mom and Brian's line of sight. All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. The Honorable Judge Catherine Brennan presiding. Judge Brennan was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair pulled back severely and reading glasses perched on her nose. She settled into her seat and surveyed the courtroom with the expression of someone who had seen every variation of human behavior and was unimpressed by all of it. Case number 47321, State of Oregon vs. Brian Michael Hutchins. She opened the file before her. Charges of assault in the third degree, battery, violation of financial trust, and attempted coercion. Mr. Westbrook, how does your client plead? Westbrook stood smoothly. Not guilty, Your Honor. We contest these charges completely and request reasonable bail for Mr. Hutchins, who has strong community ties and no prior criminal record. The prosecutor, a tired-looking woman named Sarah Vega, rose immediately. Your Honor, the defendant has already violated the restraining order by sending threatening text messages from jail. We have documented evidence of ongoing harassment and witness intimidation. The state requests remand without bail given the defendant's demonstrated inability to follow court orders. Judge Brennan looked up sharply. Violated the restraining order from custody? Vega handed papers to the bailiff, who passed them to the judge. Text messages sent yesterday afternoon from a contraband phone. The defendant threatened the victim and her family, stating, and I quote, "This isn't over, you'll regret destroying my life." Brennan's expression darkened as she read. She looked at Brian over her glasses. Mr. Hutchins, is this true? Did you send threatening messages to the alleged victims in this case? Brian's attorney whispered something urgent to him, but Brian ignored it. Those women destroyed my life. His voice was loud, echoing in the small courtroom. I gave them everything. Took care of them. And they repay me by having me arrested? They're the criminals here. Mr. Hutchins, I advise you to remain silent. Westbrook's face had gone pale. I won't be silent. Brian stood, despite his attorney trying to pull him back down. That house is mine. I fixed it up. I invested my time and money. Elena had no right to just show up and start making demands. I was defending my property. You assaulted a woman on video. Judge Brennan's voice was ice. A woman who, according to the documents before me, is a legal co-owner of said property. Sit down, Mr. Hutchins. She's lying. Brian was shouting now, deputies moving toward him. They're all lying. Patricia gave me that house. We're married. What's hers is mine. Oregon law doesn't work that way, as you're about to discover. Brennan nodded to the deputies. Remove Mr. Hutchins. He's clearly unable to conduct himself appropriately in court. They grabbed Brian's arms, but he was still yelling as they dragged him toward the side door. I'll get out eventually. You can't keep me locked up forever. And when I do, I'm coming for what's mine. The door slammed behind him, cutting off his threats. The courtroom sat in shocked silence. Even Westbrook looked stunned, shuffling papers with hands that weren't quite steady. Judge Brennan took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Well, that was enlightening. She looked at Westbrook. Counselor, I suggest you have a serious conversation with your client about appropriate courtroom behavior and the benefits of accepting a plea agreement. Your Honor, I apologize. Westbrook stood. My client is under significant stress. Your client just made the prosecution's case for them. Brennan put her glasses back on. Bail is denied. Mr. Hutchins will remain in custody until trial, which I'm scheduling for 3 weeks from today. Given his demonstrated propensity for harassment and threats, I'm also extending the restraining order to include all forms of communication, direct or indirect. She looked at our side of the courtroom, her gaze settling on me. Miss Martinez, I've reviewed your medical reports and the video evidence. I'm granting your request for a permanent restraining order, effective immediately. Mr. Hutchins is not to come within 1,000 feet of you, your mother, or your sister. He is not to contact you through any means. Violation will result in immediate arrest and additional charges. Thank you, Your Honor. Marcus stood. We also request a hearing on the property ownership dispute and the fraudulent refinancing. I'll schedule that for next week. Brennan made notes on her calendar. Miss Vega, I want a full forensic accounting of Mr. Hutchins' financial activities over the past 3 years. Bank records, credit cards, all of it. If there's fraud here, I want to know the full extent. Yes, Your Honor. Vega looked pleased. We're already working with the State Financial Crimes Unit. The hearing ended with Brennan banging her gavel, and suddenly we were being ushered out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Mom collapsed onto a bench, shaking uncontrollably. Nina sat beside her, arm around her shoulders. That went better than expected. Marcus packed up his briefcase. Brian's outburst probably added another year to his sentence. Judges don't look kindly on courtroom theatrics and direct threats. He looked insane. I was still processing what I'd witnessed. Like he'd completely lost touch with reality. Abusers often do when they lose control. Marcus's expression was grim. He's been the king of his castle for 3 years, making all the decisions, controlling everything. Now he's in a cage and the women he thought he dominated are taking back power. It's causing a psychological break. Is that going to help our case or hurt it? Nina asked. If he's mentally unstable, can he claim diminished capacity? He can try. Marcus shrugged. But the evidence of premeditation is too strong. The financial planning, the systematic theft, the hidden documents we found. That shows calculation, not mental illness. Any decent psychiatrist will testify that he knew exactly what he was doing. We left the courthouse and went to Marcus's office to discuss next steps. He spread out documents across his conference table, creating a timeline of Brian's financial crimes. Here's what we're looking at. He pointed to highlighted sections. The refinancing happened 14 months ago. Brian convinced Patricia to sign by claiming they needed emergency repairs. The $50,000 was deposited into a joint account he controlled, then systematically transferred to various gambling sites and cash withdrawals at casinos. Mom stared at the papers. I never saw any of this. He said he was handling everything online to save time. He was handling it, all right. Marcus pulled up another set of records. Then there's the tuition fund. $23,000 that Patricia had saved for Nina's education. Brian had signature authority on that account and drained it over a 6-month period. Nina's jaw clenched. 6 months. He stole from me for half a year. There's more. Marcus looked uncomfortable. I pulled Elena's credit report this morning. Brian attempted to open 3 credit cards in your name. They were declined because you have fraud alerts set up, but the attempts are documented. My stomach dropped. He tried to steal my identity? Unsuccessfully, but yes. That's federal fraud, by the way. I've already reported it to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're opening their own investigation. How did he even have my information? I rarely visit. I don't keep documents there. You gave your mom a copy of your driver's license for emergency contacts, remember? Marcus pulled out a file. 4 years ago, when you updated your address. Brian had access to everything Patricia kept in the house. The scope of it was overwhelming. This wasn't just a bad stepfather making poor decisions. This was organized, systematic, predatory behavior. What's our best-case scenario here? I asked. Realistically, what can we recover? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Best case, Brian pleads guilty to all charges. Gets 5 to 7 years in prison. We get a judgment for full restitution, about $90,000 total including the refinancing, the tuition money, and the value of stolen property. We garnish any future earnings, though realistically he'll never pay more than a fraction. And worst case? He fights it. Goes to trial. Drags you all through testimony and cross-examination. Even if we win, which we will, the emotional cost is high. And the financial recovery is the same, minimal to none. He looked at each of us. That's why I'm hoping he takes a plea. Get him locked up fast, minimize your exposure, move on with your lives. When will we know? Mom asked. His attorney will approach the prosecutor in the next few days. After that outburst today, Westbrook knows he's got a losing case. He'll push Brian hard to take a deal. Marcus gathered his papers. In the meantime, we move forward with the civil proceedings. The property hearing is Monday. We'll establish Elena and Patricia as the sole legal owners and remove any cloud on the title Brian's actions might have created. We spent another hour going over details, signing affidavits, reviewing the evidence Marcus would present. By the time we left his office, it was past noon and none of us had eaten. We found a quiet diner and ordered food nobody had much appetite for. I keep thinking about his face in that courtroom. Mom pushed salad around her plate. The hatred. Like I was the one who hurt him. That's how abusers think. Nina's voice was matter of fact. They never see themselves as the perpetrator. In his mind, he's the victim. You're the ungrateful wife who turned on him. Elena's the troublemaker who ruined his life. He's incapable of recognizing his own actions as wrong. When did you get so wise? Mom asked softly. I had time to think while you were working all those extra shifts. Nina met her eyes. And I saw things, Mom. I just didn't know how to tell you. The way Brian talked about you when you weren't around. How he'd go through your purse. The way he controlled what you wore, who you talked to. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared if I said something, he'd kick me out before I finished school. You should have told me. Would you have listened? Nina's question hung in the air. Or would you have defended him, said I was misunderstanding, asked me not to make waves? Mom was quiet for a long moment. Probably the latter. I wasn't ready to see it. Wasn't ready to admit I'd made such a terrible mistake. It's not a mistake to want companionship. I reached across the table. It's not a mistake to fall for someone's lies when they're designed to deceive. Brian's good at this. He's probably done it before, probably will try again with someone else when he gets out. Not if I have anything to say about it. Nina's expression was fierce. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did. Every dating site, every social media platform. He won't be able to prey on anyone else. The property hearing on Monday was anticlimactic compared to Wednesday's drama. Brian's attorney didn't even show up, sending a junior associate who stammered through a half-hearted argument that the refinancing gave Brian some claim to the house. Judge Brennan shut that down in under 5 minutes, reviewing the original deed and mortgage documents before ruling definitively that the property belonged solely to Mom and me. Brian had no ownership interest, never had, and the refinancing debt was secured against the property but didn't transfer any ownership rights to him. We left the courthouse with certified copies of the judgment. The house was legally, irrevocably ours. Brian could never touch it again. That should have felt like victory, but standing on the courthouse steps, looking at the paperwork, all I felt was tired. The house was ours, but it was also a shell of what it had been. Emptied of furniture, stripped of memories, carrying debt we couldn't afford. I think we should sell it. I said the words I'd been avoiding all week. Mom and Nina both turned to look at me. It's too big, too expensive, and there's too much pain there now. We sell, pay off the refinancing, and find Mom something smaller. Something that's just hers, that Brian never touched. Mom stared at the courthouse building, processing. Your father built that house for us. Dad built us a home. I corrected gently. The physical building doesn't matter. Home is wherever we are together. And right now, that house doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a crime scene. Nina nodded slowly. Elena's right. I can't imagine ever living there again. Every room just reminds me of what Brian destroyed. We spent the afternoon with Sophia Kim, my childhood friend who'd become a real estate agent. She walked through the house with us, taking notes and photos, her professional demeanor slipping occasionally when she saw the damage. I can list it as is, or we can do minimal staging to improve the sale price. She stood in the empty living room, the space echoing. Given the market right now and the neighborhood, even in this condition, you'll probably get enough to pay off the refinancing and have something left over. How much left over? Mom asked. Sophia ran numbers on her tablet. Conservative estimate, after paying off the $50,000 loan, realtor fees, and closing costs, you're looking at maybe $30,000 to $40,000. Not a fortune, but enough for a solid down payment on a smaller place. Do it. I made the decision. List it this week. Let's move forward. The next 3 weeks blurred together. Brian's attorney negotiated a plea deal, 6 years in prison with possibility of parole after 4, full restitution ordered, though everyone acknowledged he'd never pay more than pennies on the dollar. Brian accepted it, probably because the alternative was a trial where Mr. Reynolds' security footage would be played for a jury. Even he wasn't delusional enough to think he could explain away video evidence of assault. The house sold faster than expected to a young family with 2 kids. They saw past the damage to the good bones underneath, talked excitedly about restoring the built-ins and refinishing the floors. Mom cried when she signed the closing papers, but they were different tears than before. Not grief, exactly. More like release. We used the proceeds to put a down payment on a small 2-bedroom condo for Mom, close to the hospital where she worked. Modern, efficient, with no ghosts haunting the corners. Nina moved back in temporarily, sleeping on the couch until the spring semester started. I returned to Seattle in December, my leave of absence officially ending. My apartment felt foreign after everything, too quiet, too clean, too separate from the messy reality of family crisis. I threw myself back into work, but something had shifted. The career that had once felt like everything now felt like just one part of a larger life. In January, Mom called with news. The Financial Crimes Unit had traced $50,000 of Brian's gambling losses. The casino was cooperating with the investigation, and there was talk of recovering some funds through their anti-money laundering protocols. It wouldn't be everything, but it might be enough to restore Nina's tuition fund. February brought another call. Nina had been accepted into a study abroad program in Spain for the fall semester, fully funded. She was crying with joy, talking about art history and ancient architecture and finally getting to see the world beyond Riverside. March, and Mom started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a physician's assistant from the hospital. But she sounded lighter on the phone, laughing at his jokes, making plans beyond just surviving day to day. I visited for Easter, the first holiday we'd spent together since Thanksgiving. We gathered in Mom's new condo, cooking together in the tiny kitchen, arguing about how much garlic to put in the pasta sauce. Normal family chaos. Beautiful in its ordinariness. Later, after Nina had gone out with friends and Mom was doing dishes, she turned to me with wet hands and serious eyes. "I never thanked you properly. For coming home. For fighting when I couldn't. For saving us. You saved yourself." I handed her a dish towel. "I just helped you remember you could." The final piece fell into place in May. The prosecutor called to inform us that Brian had been moved to a medium security facility upstate. His behavior in county jail had been problematic, multiple infractions for trying to use contraband phones, attempting to contact Mom through other inmates' families. The new facility was more restrictive, more isolated. He wouldn't be eligible for parole for at least 4 years, possibly longer given his disciplinary record. I sat in my Seattle apartment, looking out at the city lights, and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 months. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. The scars were still too fresh for that. But peace. The knowledge that we'd survived. That we'd fought back. That Brian's attempt to destroy us had failed. My phone buzzed with a group text. Nina had sent a photo from her college graduation, cap and gown, genuine smile, diploma held high. Mom had replied with heart emojis and exclamation points. I added my own congratulations, then opened my laptop. I had work to do, a life to live, a future to build. The past 6 months had taught me something crucial. Family wasn't about houses or belongings or maintaining perfect peace. It was about showing up when things got hard. About fighting for each other. About refusing to let predators win. Brian had tried to erase us. Instead, he'd reminded us who we really were. Martinez women, strong and stubborn and impossible to break. Dad would have been proud. I closed my laptop and looked out at the Seattle skyline, thinking about Riverside, about Mom and her new condo, about Nina planning her Spanish adventure. We were scattered now, living separate lives in different places. But we were connected in ways Brian's theft and violence could never touch. The house on Willow Creek Drive was gone, sold to strangers who would make their own memories there. But we'd survived. We'd won. And that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.